All right, I think we are ready to get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have with us Nick Stephanidakis and Brianne Kamens. They're going to be talking to us today about using Archibus to mitigate COVID-19. Nick is the VP of Field Sales and Enablement for Archibus Saraview. He has over 20 years of progressive experience in the fields of real estate and facility management, mechanical and application engineering, and enterprise software deployments. Prior to his current sales leadership role, Nick served as Archibus's Director of Client Services, managing professional services, technical support, and training. During this time, Nick supported and led enterprise-scale global implementation projects of Archibus software and services together with the global network of Archibus business partners. Brianne, who is a solutions manager from JLL Technologies, has over 6 years of environmental health and safety experience within higher education institutions. Prior to working for JLL, Brianne managed facilities, health, and safety programs for a university, which included the safety, health, and well-being of maintenance staff, contractors, and oversight of hazardous building materials program. Brianne is passionate about worker safety and hopes that her previous experience, coupled with Archibus knowledge, will provide value to organizations and their continued response efforts against COVID-19. I do have just a few housekeeping items for you. First, everyone is on mute to eliminate any background noise. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the questions section. And then at the end of the webinar, we will have a short survey. So we would really appreciate it if you would just take a few minutes to fill that out for us. And with that, I will turn it over to Nick.
Great, thank you, Danielle. And welcome everybody. So today we are going to be talking about using Archibus to mitigate and manage through this process that we're all currently going through. As far as an agenda goes, we're going to look at, we did on a previous webinar, we did a quick poll, and I thought I would share some of the results of that poll today. And then talk about, in terms of how we set this, this session up, talk about what organizations are asking, what are the kinds of questions that organizations are asking, and then how using the software can we address those questions. And after that, then we'll hand it over to Brianne to run us through actually using Archibus to manage through a lot of different scenarios. Okay, and then we'll close with some insights at the end. So regarding the poll that we recently did in our last webinar earlier this week, one of the questions was, or the first question was, to what degree were you able to use an existing business continuity plan? And I think the overwhelming response was that people had business continuity plans in place, but they really weren't set up for the scale of this particular crisis. You know, I don't think any plans really envisioned all locations essentially being affected more or less at once. To what degree will COVID-19 change your long-term workplace strategy? And I think here, similar, there's a big trend that we're going to see change in remote working and really expect an increase in remote working. I think companies are realizing that remote working can work in most cases. Maybe not across the board. Obviously, there's positions that need to be on site, but I think we'll see an overall increase in remote working going forward as a long-term effect. And the last question, what is your primary area of focus right now? And we'll talk about the change that people are seeing and going through right now is now starting to evolve into planning. So what is it people are focusing on? What are they going to do when people come back to work? Looking at what if scenarios, how they're going to manage the reentry, how are they going to manage occupancy and processes going forward. To that end, we we kind of look at this as a process or a journey that people are going through from the very beginning when this all started. How do we keep people safe? Then we went into executing business continuity plans and moving folks out of work and supporting out of offices and supporting them with equipment, resources that they need to make sure that they're able to do their jobs. And then now we're looking at manage. How do we make sure that people have the equipment? We're also keeping business running. What are the minimum staffing levels that we need to keep at our locations to operate? And then now we're starting to transition more into planning. Okay, what's it going to look like in the near future? What's it going to look like as people start coming back to the office? How are we going to extend and expand and eventually get back to some new normal environment? And then, of course, executing the move back. And then what is the new normal going to look like down the road, whatever down the road turns out to be. And on that process of where we are today in both the moving out, manage, and even now starting to think about the planning, what are the different kinds of questions that people are asking at different levels of an organization and at different responsibilities? So, and do we have the answers that our teams might be asking? So if I'm a health and safety officer, for example, how do I protect my employees now and when everybody returns? How can I track affected areas in the trends that we're seeing in our organizations? How do we effectively communicate updates to employees? So if we're shutting down a portion of a location, how do we communicate to those affected people in locations? If I'm a space planner, where are we going to put people when they return? Obviously, we're probably not going to have everybody come back to work on the same day and go back to normal. So what is that going to look like? What are our new capacities going to be, or density levels based on, in the US CDC recommendations or other organization recommendations for safe working conditions? How do I make sure that the employees feel safe coming to work? If I'm a supervisor and responsible for maintaining a facility, how do I ensure that the team has the appropriate training and the PPE that they need to do their work? And when are the optimal times for scheduling cleaning or other services so that we're not in a situation where we're having too much interaction with individuals where it's not maybe necessary? And as a worker, as a craft person, am I performing my work safely? Are there procedures that I'm following? Are they protecting my safety and the safety of my colleagues? So there's lots of questions. These are just a sampling. I'm sure there's many, many other questions that you and your organizations are asking today. And what we hope today to do is to show how we might use Archibus to answer some of those questions and manage some of the underlying processes and data around those questions so that we can feel confident in what we are doing. So at a high level, as I think maybe many of you know, Archibus is a big, broad product. But some of the things we're going to focus on today is using Archibus to report and monitor affected locations, manage physical distancing, notifying staff, managing meeting room schedules and cleaning in a responsible way, protecting staff with the proper equipment and training that they need, and many, many other things as well that are actually beyond the scope of this presentation today. I'll start with environmental health and safety. We want to be able to provide the tools to identify and track where we within our organization might have either presumptive or confirmed cases, and we want to make sure we're tracking that very carefully so that we can enable our teams to respond effectively to those situations. And we'll get into some of the tools within environmental health and safety that support the tracking and monitoring in response to any incidents that might occur in your locations. Emergency preparedness. If there is an incident, what do we need to do? How can we mitigate that? Do we need to close an entire building, a floor, a location of a floor? Who do we have to notify? What are the people? And things like occupancy become more and more important so that we understand who occupies that space. How do we designate that space is now offline? So again, coming back to space management, we want to maintain an accurate occupancy data now more than ever. We want to know where people are where they're assigned, so that we can mitigate and manage their exposure to any potential risks. We may want to start using things like space classifications to identify areas that are maybe more prone or have been affected, and what are the maybe special cleaning needs that those kinds of spaces have. And then, of course, the big thing that I think a lot of people are starting to really work on and consider is, what are those back to work occupancy schemes going to look like? Again, we're probably not going to bring everybody back to work and have 100% occupancy or full occupancy. Are we going to manage the distribution of desks, offices, and so on to maintain the safe social distancing? For reservations, back-to-back meetings may not be very popular for a while. So using the tools to make sure that we're building in buffers between meetings to allow for sufficient time to clean and prepare the rooms for the next meeting. And automating things like service requests to kick off those cleaning services between meetings. And for the people that are actually doing the work and cleaning, we want to make sure we're also protecting them so that they have the proper procedures and resources that they need to do their job. We want to ensure that we're managing their shifts and that their schedules are set up in such a way that we're minimizing the contact and the exposure that those people have to one another and to their colleagues that they might be working around. And again, integrating with the other procedures that we're setting up. So if it's creating a service request as part of a meeting reservation or as part of an inspection survey, integrating all those processes into our normal but modified work processes. And ensuring that we're adding the proper protocols into those procedures so that the people performing the work have access to the most accurate and proper information for performing their work safely. So with that, setting that as a backdrop, I'm going to hand it over to Brianne to actually take us through some scenarios of using the software to address these concerns. So Brianne, if you'd take it away.
Perfect. So thanks, Nick, for the introduction, and thank you to all attending today's webinar. I recognize that the majority of you on this webinar are here because you're going to be actively involved in your organization's COVID-19 efforts. So I appreciate you taking the little time that you likely do have right now to learn more about how Archibus can be used to aid in your company's response efforts during this time. With that said, and what we had seen from Nick when he was going through his slide deck, what I'm about to demonstrate isn't going to focus solely on the environmental health and safety application, rather a variety of applications within Archibus. The reason for this is that we truly want to demonstrate the different ways you can leverage what you might already have and provide inspiration for how something such as an IWMS can be used for managing your COVID-19 response now while we're dealing with, what's changing within our culture and organizations, as well as into the future. Based on this and the fact that I'm only able to show so many solutions and so many different options due to time, I encourage everyone to view this demonstration as a learning experience as well as a brainstorming session. So if there are things that you've thought of or your company is currently actively doing with Archibus, please make sure that you leave that information in the chat section on your GoToWebinar screen. At times like these, sharing knowledge amongst one another is one of the most powerful things we can do to make sure that we're all kind of able to work towards the same solution together. Okay, so in framing this demonstration, Archibus as a whole, the first area I wanted to cover briefly is what you see when you first log in, which is a home page. So while some organizations likely elect to use the process navigation style, which again is totally fine, home pages can offer a variety of other benefits too. As you can see, what I've done here is I've created specifically for this demonstration what's referred to as a COVID-19 response homepage. And this homepage essentially has everything that I would need as someone who is managing my company's facilities response in one centralized area. with things such as the different processes and tasks being organized in a particular order depending on how I want to access this information. At the very top of the homepage, you'll see that we have added in a notification bucket. The intent of this notification bucket that says COVID-19 notifications here is that it allows you to communicate broadly with those that will be accessing your system, such as your maintenance group staff. So if you have, let's say, a customer service desk, for instance, and they're going to be receiving phone calls, inquiries, or even your maintenance staff and they need to learn about things such as building closures, you can utilize something such as this feature to make sure that everybody is kept in the loop and made aware. Though this notification at the very top is not necessarily an out-of-the-box feature, it is actually a customization that we added in for this demonstration. It is a useful tool that if you feel that you can use it within your organization, I highly recommend that you talk to your business partner. In addition to this notification at the top, we've gone and added a series of different metrics to this homepage. These metrics are a great way to get a visual reference as to how your organization is actually performing, in this case, from an environmental health and safety standpoint, without having to drill further into a variety of different applications. So as you can see here, what we're depicting in these building metrics is an actual visualization of within each building in the portfolio, how many of these cases or how many incidents have been reported whereby somebody has COVID-19 and it's been confirmed, versus when people have been reporting that they're unwell, but it's actually been attributed to the normal flu. In addition to that, we have a series of what we've called our COVID-19 alerts. So again, just a different way to visualize what is taking place from an organizational standpoint of how many people within our organization have COVID confirmed cases, in addition to who has reported something, but they're just suffering from a normal flu or flu-like symptoms. And then what we're looking at for the average amount of time off work. So one of the things that we have heard time and time again is that if you're feeling unwell, take that time, go into self-isolation for about 10, 14 days, depending on what your government has recommended. And so we can track then how that's going to impact us from a labor standpoint and how long people are going to be off work. So recognizing that many of users on this call are here because they're interested in learning more about the environmental health and safety application and how it can be used to mitigate COVID-19, I'm now going to walk through a few use cases and scenarios focused directly on this topic that can be managed within the environmental health and safety application. As part of this, I'm going to be discussing how the system can be used to collect employees' personal health information. So I do want to take a moment to highlight Archibus's capabilities to allow for different user and security roles to be configured, ensuring that information is only going to be accessible to those that need it. So following the principles of minimal need to know when it comes to personal health information. Therefore, with proper configuration, whatever you have in place for your government privacy and access laws can be complied with. So when it comes to COVID-19, we know that it's important that at this time, if an employee is feeling unwell, we want them to be able to self-isolate, regardless if they've gone, they've seen a doctor, or even if they've gone and had a test and it's been tested positive or not. This means that we need to be able to provide them some sort of mechanism to easily report their symptoms so that they won't be coming into work. The EH&S application empowers employees to report online from the comfort of their own home. So this can be done through Web Central, which is the view that we're seeing right now, in addition to the mobile application if you have that deployed within your organization. Within this reporting window, one of the other things I want to point out is that we can not only use this to report for employees within our organization, but also for people that might be visitors or contractors to our site. So let's say that your organization becomes made aware that someone who's attended your site is unwell. You could also log this information for reporting purposes too. Once an incident has been reported, it can then be tracked and managed through a complete incident lifecycle using the track incident task that's part of the application. As you'll see that once I've landed on this page, all incident information is visible, and you can see that there is a series of COVID symptoms here that are showing up and that have been reported. By going in and clicking on a particular incident, I can pull up the information that's been originally reported by an employee, in addition to adding in new information as required. So from an EH&S perspective, clearly it is important then when we are collecting information that that information is going to add value to us as an organization, especially when it comes to reporting. This is where something such as Archibus's flexible architecture is extremely valuable, as it allows you to define a variety of different items that you can use for tracking purposes. So for instance, how I've gone and approached this demonstration is that for the incident type, I've added in an incident type of COVID symptoms. And then for the injury category code, I've added in the option that somebody could potentially have the flu, or they could have actually gone and tested it positive for COVID-19. The reason that I chose this approach was because we do want to encourage people to report when they are not well and be able to respond proactively. So be made aware that they're feeling unwell and potentially do things such as clean their workstation. But I don't want to have it so that we're creating unnecessarily alarm and then assume every workplace incident is going to be COVID-19 related. So by going and presuming all initial reports are suspect by assigning them the incident type of COVID symptoms, and then clarifying that information later on once we get additional information from an employee, so things such as that injury category code, whether it's going to be the flu or COVID-19, we can then accurately track the amount of COVID-19 cases within our organization. Now, once we have this information put in here, the other thing that we can have is that when an employee has actually reported an incident, this can be directly linked to their site information. So their workstation information that's already part of the Archibus system. So again, highlighting the fact that we can have that integrated capabilities and be able to track things accordingly down to that spatial level. Also, organizations might elect to use what's referred to as this medical information tab here. And the reason being is if we do have somebody within our organization that has tested positive for COVID-19, we want to make sure that we can understand the severity of their actual illness and then what we might require on our end as they return back to work and what that duration might look like until they come back to our organization. From an incident response standpoint, another part that I wanted to point out that ties into when we're actually tracking information within our organization is the ability to go within the background data and define this root cause category code. So another aspect that we've heard when it comes to COVID-19 is that when somebody is actually positive for the virus, it can be one of three mechanisms in which they contracted it. So I've gone and actually added that into the system here, whereby the first is travel. So let's say you had an employee within your organization that had recently traveled. You can track that as the root cause associated to the reporting. The other one is personal transmission. So let's say that somebody has known somebody who has traveled recently or somebody else that had been exposed to COVID-19. You can track that as the exposure method as well. And then lastly, we have community transmission. So those cases where somebody has actually contracted the virus, but we're unsure how. So this is something else that can be useful to your organization to determine how these incidents are actually getting into your facilities and how to manage them accordingly. For those who have just reported that they have flu-like symptoms, alternatively, I've just been marking them as unknown. Also, as part of our incident response, we have the capability to go and generate a service request, in which you can see here I've actually generated a service request for this particular incident. What I've done for the service requests that are dealing with COVID-19, and I'll get into a little bit more detail when we go into the maintenance side of things, is that I've actually created a specific problem type that deals with COVID-19. So using the actual housekeeping tier 1, and then I created a tier 2 level of COVID sanitization. This means that it's going to have a separate SLA and a workflow associated with it, so you can have these triage in a different manner within your organization. The other aspects I've wanted to point out is the ability to add work restrictions into your actual platform. And the reason that this can be effective is that, let's say you do have a series of people that are going to be reporting that they have COVID-like symptoms or they've actually contracted COVID-19. This allows you to actually analyze from a data perspective how long people are going to be away from the workplace and then get accurate trends as people are coming back to work as to what that duration looks like. And so that ties into that metric on that alert page that we had seen on the homepage at the beginning. Lastly, within this area, we can view different types of documentation. So if your organization does require a doctor's note from employees so they can be off work, I know that not all do, but if it is something that you are asking for, this is where you can actually attach that doctor's note as part of the incident record. So there's a lot of different information through the actual incident reporting and tracking incidents and doing that investigation piece that we can go and we can capture, but how can we use that effectively to go and report? So there's a variety of reports and metrics that can be run within Archibus that are out of the box. If these reports, however, aren't necessarily capturing what you want, I do want to point out that organizations can always leverage something such as the View Definition Wizard to create their own custom reports and consolidate information into a variety of different views. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I did want to highlight two reports that I find particularly valuable. And the first is the Incidence Count Report. So the incidence count report is an interactive drill down report at the end of the day. So I want to be able to group things based on building, and then that incident type I'm going to be looking at for COVID symptoms. When I go and I actually filter on this, it's now going to show me what my facilities look like from a COVID symptoms perspective and how many incident counts I've had per building. From here, because we said it's an interactive report, I can then click on a particular building, and then I'm able to pull up all of the incident details associated with that particular building, in addition to things such as the respective injury category code, as well as the root cause category code. And then I can export this information if I need to manipulate it further. So again, this is just a quick and easy report to kind of go and organize data and view a lot of that information that we can leverage for other reporting features. The last view that I wanted to show is the incidence map. And so the intent of the incidence map, and Nick had quickly covered this in his overview in the presentation, is this allows you to leverage your spatial information to show where reports of COVID symptoms have been made within your real estate portfolio. So again, I'm going to focus on where we've had reports of COVID symptoms. And in doing that, you can see that it's going to pull up my area in which I'm focusing. For those familiar with some of the data sets, I'm focusing on what's referred to as the Bedford site within Archibus. And it's showing me kind of here a heat map type overview as to what are the areas that have had COVID-like symptoms reported and which areas are kind of more severe based on the total number of incidents. Now, this is telling me how many people have reported COVID-like symptoms, but not necessarily how many people actually have COVID-19. So this is where I can go, I can get the information a little bit more granular and add in that injury category code that I had broken out previously. I can go and click show, and you'll see that this is now going to update, and it's demonstrating something such as this NCO5 building has a larger amount of COVID-19 related cases compared to the rest of this organization. I can then go and actually view more information about this area by leveraging the spatial information. So I can go and select a particular floor, and here it's going to actually be able to highlight for me what locations those COVID related cases have actually been reported within the organization. The next piece that I wanted to talk about with regard to the environmental health and safety application is how we can use it for training our staff as well as managing personal protective equipment. So there are going to be staff within our organization that are going to continue to provide services and require things such as education and training on what they can do currently within the workplace to safely perform their duties. And then that training might need to change as we trend towards people returning back to work. So to ensure that people are receiving the right sort of training, such as, let's say, a trade person, they might need to have different training because they're entering different types of spaces compared to somebody who's going to be an office worker. And to make sure that those respective jobs that people are equipped with the appropriate PPE, you can use things such as the work categories feature within Archibus to manage requirements at the worker level. So how we can view that is if I go into the track employee work categories, and if I go and view myself as an actual user role, from here you can see that I've been assigned what's referred to as a work category as cleaner. If I go and I actually click on that, I have the option now to go and add things such as the work category training, in which it's going to pull up all of the training that has been assigned to this particular work category. I can then go and assign this training to myself, or I can go and select which training I require, in addition to reviewing any sort of existing training that I might have had. So for instance, I've already been assigned something such as proper hand washing. Now, what you'll see is that this training that I am showing here, this is all training that is COVID-19 related. So you can, in the background data, go and create different types of training categories and then training programs associated with those categories to make sure we're capturing this new information and new types of training to make sure that our staff are being kept safe. In addition, as I mentioned, we can use this same type of application for assigning personal protective equipment to make sure that if they have to enter spaces, that they have the right resources to do so safely. Also, when it comes to training, once training does get assigned to an employee, I do want to point out that they don't necessarily need to go into the application to be notified that they've been assigned to training, but notifications can be configured in the background so that they're made aware of this training by receiving that email. So the next area that I wanted to focus on is the emergency preparedness application. So the emergency preparedness application is a great way to manage your organization's emergency response protocols. In particular, how you can communicate broadly to your organization to ensure things such as critical information is reaching the intended audience. So as you saw at the very top of this homepage, this system has been configured to have a notification visible when users log in. The emergency preparedness application, however, also has a notification method that's referred to as advisory bulletins. The great thing about these advisory bulletins is that they can actually be tailored to two different audience groups, so your employee as well as your manager audience group, depending on the message that needs to be sent out. So advisory bulletins don't necessarily always need to be viewed within Archibus. You'll see here from the screen that I have some language here that indicates that I can use this for email purposes as well. So it can be configured to send out email bulletins rather than expecting people to log into the system. So for this email functionality, you have the ability to select who is actually going to receive this notification. So I can have it so there's recipients within my actual organization, as well as if we have emergency contacts defined in the emergency preparedness application, that they can be notified as well. So this allows us to make sure the respective audience is receiving notification immediately. And then you can get more granular based on things such as location information as well. The latest version of each bulletin can then be viewed here within the actual system for quick reference to determine what had been sent out last to people within the company. So while we can track, or while we have seen how we can track incidents of reported COVID-19 symptoms at that floor plan level, when I looked at something such as the incident map, it's also important that we be mindful that providing access at a broad level to that type of information could potentially infringe on the privacy of personal health information. Yet, we have to recognize that it's still important to make sure that we can communicate that these spaces that have suspected cases, so that these areas can be avoided for things such as worker safety until they have been cleaned or that they've been cleared for re-entry. That's where we can utilize in the emergency preparedness application what's referred to as the update room status. So we can leverage this area as a means of communicating if a given area is going to be unfit for use. So by simply selecting, so if I go and pull up this building and then I pull up the respective floor plan, as you can see here, I have a variety of rooms that have already been denoted and highlighted in orange that they're unfit for use, but they'll be recoverable. So I can go and I can make changes within this area simply by selecting additional spaces that need to have a recovery status updated, and then simply going and clicking on set recovery status and setting it to something such as unfit, or alternatively, if an area has been cleaned, marking it as that it is back to fit for use. The other important piece of this functionality is that it allows organizations to capture more than just an employee's dedicated workspace. For instance, let's say that in conducting an incident investigation for somebody who had reported COVID-19 type symptoms, it was discovered that that employee regularly conducts meeting spaces in a given space, such as this one here in the middle of the floor plan. You can then actually denote these areas within the application to make sure that people aren't accessing them as well until it undergoes things such as proper cleaning. The last piece I wanted to review as it pertains to the emergency preparedness area is how we can use the system to track key employee information that is valuable in emergency situations. So within the defined employee emergency information, organizations can capture things such as an employee's emergency contact. So if I go and pull up Joan here from the list, you can go and capture things such as somebody's emergency contact. So what that emergency contact phone number is, their name, and how they have a relationship to that employee. The reason this is important is because if we do have someone within our organization that has reported COVID-19 symptoms and we're not able to get in contact with them, this allows us a different way to actually go and reach out to them. The other aspect within here is we have the ability to denote what's referred to as a contingency facility. So one of the things that we have seen with our organizations as part of their business continuity planning is sometimes they might denote a different area that can be working, or we've seen a trend for people moving towards working from home. So within this contingency facility aspect, we've actually gone and denoted a work from home building code to denote when people are going to be off site if you don't have allocated spaces within your organization. To then be able to view where those people are going to be working from, if you needed to reach out to people within your organization, you can simply then go and run this employees and emergency information floor plan report and pull up the information and see then how many people are, which ones are working at a contingency facility and what that contingency facility is. So for here, we have a series of people working from home. Now with COVID-19, though most organizations have closed down to promote things such as social distancing, a lot of facilities are still operational, such as hospitals, or they have critical building systems that need to be maintained. Therefore, I wanted to focus on different things that can be implemented from a building maintenance standpoint to ensure that our maintenance staff can perform their work in a safe manner. So as we saw within incident tracking, we can generate service requests associated with a particular incident. In that case, what I was doing is I was generating work requests to have the workstation or office of that person reporting symptoms cleaned, and I used the problem types housekeeping and COVID sanitization. As you can see here, these are now within the building operations console, in which how they route in your building ops console can totally be at your discretion based on the SLA. So if I go and I click on a particular work request, and then I drill down into the reference material, you'll see that I have attached a document under the reference material here. In this case, this is a specific cleaning procedure that staff would use to clean a space. By having it as part of the work request, it ensures that they can easily access the appropriate procedure to perform a given task, whether it's by accessing it on Web Central or on their mobile device. To get this reference material attached to a particular work order, I use what comes in Archibus as the manage reference document. And so within the managed reference documents, you're able to assign documents to a variety of different problem types as well as PM procedures. Also, as our maintenance staff still continue to perform and maintain our critical infrastructure, it's important that we're able to set them up for success to be able to implement practices such as social distancing. One option for this is conducting shift changes to reduce the amount of people on site without reducing the overall number of bodies or the ability to complete work within a given day. In the managed craftsperson shift area, you can go and create a variety of new shifts to take into account this change. So in this particular case, what I've done is I've created 3 different shifts: the COVID day shift, evening shift, and the night shift. And each one is working a total of 7.5 hours per day, whereby I have them actually spaced out by 30 minutes each time to make sure that we're going to reduce an overlap in people on site. From an actual scheduling standpoint, if we want to be able to visualize how that's going to go and impact our ability to go and schedule work, that's where we can use something such as the actual labor scheduler to visualize how this will impact our operations. So that shift, I had gone and I assigned it to the janitorial the janitorial workers on the Bedford team. And as I go and I apply that filter, and I've made them now a 24-hour organization, I can now see how their shifts have been allocated accordingly, and then I can assign a work in an informed way. I now want to shift towards a more optimistic view of what our facilities will look like, how they will be managed once employees return back to work, and how Archibus can be leveraged as part of this process. So namely, I want to focus on how we can ensure employees return back to a safe environment and are able to practice things such as social distancing if necessary. So to do this, the first area I wanted to review was compliance management and how it can be utilized in this situation. Originally, I didn't have anything on compliance management and in particular workplace inspections, but after listening to some client needs over the past few days, I understood the importance and the value that inspections could play as part of the back to work process. So at the forefront of these inquiries were things such as, how can I go and create a standard or inspect our workplaces and provide things if necessary, and provide those findings, if necessary, to make sure that our employees are going to be kept safe and made aware that we've done our due diligence. So by using something such as the defined compliance questionnaire that's part of compliance management, you can go and create any type of inspection questionnaire that your organization requires. So it's a simple drag and drop interface where you have a variety of different question types that you can add into your actual survey. And you also have the ability within these question areas to go and add what's referred to as follow-up questions, which you can see here by this question tree. In creating these follow-up questions, they can also have a series of different dependencies. So whether that is an additional follow-up question, so you require more information, or if it requires a follow-up action, such as if I respond no, that means I need to go and do something such as create a service request. So once a questionnaire has been created, it can then be assigned to a compliance requirement and then a compliance event generated to make that survey active. Once that survey is active, what you can then do is complete the questionnaire in the actual mobile application. So as you can see here, as I switch my screen over to mobile, I have this application showing up that says they have a COVID-19 cleaning inspection that is currently due. So as I go and I drill into that actual inspection, everything we had seen in the defined compliance questionnaire is showing up here. And we can go and see that based on our responses, that those different dependencies are showing up as well. So for instance, this first one, if I respond no, it allows me the ability to actually go directly from the screen and create a service request for the actionable item that the question tells me. So once we have confirmed it's safe for people to actually return to their spaces, we need to be able to plan what a spatial arrangement will look like. A key term many of you have likely heard regularly is the term social distancing, and I've referenced it a few times throughout this actual demonstration. So based on that, how can we actually use something such as Archibus to be able to visualize what it might look like or what social distancing practices might look like from an allocation standpoint? That's where we can use something such as the actual space console. So as the space console loads, I'm going to go and I'm going to pull up a building here. So I'm focusing on NCO5 because as we've seen, there was a lot of reported cases there. So for this particular building, we can see that there's a variety of different workstations that have multiple people at each workstation here on the right-hand side. So not necessarily the greatest situation for practicing social distancing. What I can do is to go and make those informed decisions of how I'm going to change my occupancy is I can go and actually turn on my occupancy layer to assess which areas are occupiable to make informed decisions as to where people might need to move. In addition, I can use this view to actually edit my data to indicate which spaces are no longer going to be occupiable so we don't accidentally put someone where they shouldn't be. You'll see that once I turned on this occupancy highlight, there's some spaces at the very bottom here that have people but are now deemed unoccupiable. The other feature that you can leverage within Space Console and what we've done as part of the background data is the ability to add on different room categories and room types to be able to track COVID-19 cases within your organization. So I have created an actual room category of COVID-19, and based on that room category, whenever this category gets assigned to a space, those areas are no longer occupiable. I can then take this information a little bit deeper and then drill that down to the actual room type, whereby I can now visualize based on where we've had reports of COVID-19, how many of those spaces have actually been confirmed to be COVID-19, how many of those areas have been something such as sanitized, and which of those areas are suspect. This allows me to determine which occupants I need to move and where to not place people until an area has been cleared. The other thing is sometimes within our organization, employees won't have a dedicated workspace, rather they might be hoteling in. Again, using something such as the space console, you can identify which spaces are used for hoteling, and those ones are the ones outlined here in the purple, and then adjust them accordingly from an occupancy and hotelable standpoint so that people won't be able to book them moving forward. If you don't manage your spaces that are hotelable within the space console, that's totally fine, but rather the hoteling application, you can visualize which rooms are actually hotelable by going into the Highlight Hotelable Rooms section and pulling up the floor plan associated with that space. So this would be the alternative view from what we had seen in the actual space console. We can then go and actually reconcile this data with something such as the Define Hotelable Rooms, where we can again go and pull up that exact building and the respective floor plan. And this allows us to actually go and do bulk uploads to define whether a space is hotelable or not. So if I search on the ones that currently are, I can go and make a series of rooms in one fell swoop, no longer hotelable. To close, I wanted to cover some features that can be used to ensure our meeting space are safe too. So collaboration is key within organizations, and to remove meeting spaces altogether isn't necessarily feasible. So we do need to consider that procedures that can be implemented to facilitate shared spaces. So aside from reducing room occupancies, which we had already covered within Space Console, we can also use something such as room reservations to establish things such as automatically creating work requests for cleaning a room following a meeting. This is done by going into the room arrangement types. So for this one in particular, by selecting this meeting room, what I've done is I've added on the trade code of janitorial. That means anytime someone makes a request for a meeting room, it's going to automatically create a work request for janitorial services prior to and after that meeting has taken place. To ensure that there is enough time for our cleaning staff to actually go and perform their duties, we can also go and block off time on either side of the room booking. The other benefit that this adds at the end of the day is that it reduces the overlap of people when trying to switch between meetings. So by going into room arrangements and then choosing which room configuration and which room arrangement we're looking at, we can go and add what's referred to as these pre-block and these post-block minutes. So in this case, we've added 30 minutes on either side. While ultimately this will reduce the utilization of a meeting space, it's an easy way for us to manage collaborative areas in a safe manner. So that is it for the demonstration. Again, if you guys had any sort of ideas or inspiration, please feel free to leave them in the chat section. And now I'm going to pass things back over to Nick.
Great. Thank you, Brianne. That was really great. Hopefully everybody can see my screen again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that was a really comprehensive tour of all of the capabilities that Archibus has out of the box in order to help manage really a broad range of aspects of how people can manage through this situation, from environmental health and safety, emergency preparedness, space management, reservations, maintenance, and even compliance management, as Brianne showed, for conducting ad hoc inspections and taking action when those inspections occur. So again, really comprehensive, high-level overview of the capabilities, and hope you found that there's something in this that you can take away and possibly use in your own environments. I do want to close with a few additional things. One, as you may know, Archibus has made the environmental health and safety application free for all customers, and the usage of that is allowed through September 30th, 2021. So we want to make sure that there's ample time for you to actually gain the benefits of the application. And it's available for all users with existing active subscriptions. And we encourage anybody that is using Archibus and does not have EH&S to please feel free to contact your business partner to take advantage of this offer. Coming back to the journey that we presented at the beginning of the presentation of where people are in terms of planning or managing through the crisis, or planning what it's going to look like going back, So what's next for folks? What we're finding is organizations are looking more and more for data to help them plan their return to work programs. As an example, this map shows the coronavirus statistics overlaid with corporate locations across an entire portfolio globally. At a glance, corporate real estate or facilities can start to plan which locations might be able to start returning to work. These are just some of the things that we're seeing people starting to look for. As we drill deeper, we can even get down to more granular levels of a map, and again, overlaying those locations. And if we have locations that are in areas where the trends may be more advantageous, so it's starting to go down, and they're either critical locations or the density is at such a level that maybe we can start planning how we want to reintroduce that part of the workforce into our offices, and maybe start conducting what-if scenarios and how we may utilize the data and some of the things that Brianne was talking about today for trying to plan what is our capacity going to look like, what is our density going to look like in the future, and how many people can we introduce to the organization now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now. And that's actually a good lead-in into our next session, which will be what if scenario planning that we'll be conducting in parallel with our CERAVI colleagues. So we'll be running a scenario planning session, planning a return to the workplace in an unpredictable CRE landscape. I believe that's scheduled for May 5th, but keep an eye out for an invitation to that session. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Danielle, and I'd just like to say thank you very much to Brianne for taking us through that comprehensive demo.
Yes, thank you, Brianne and Nick. We do have a few questions that are in the chat box here. So the first one is, does Archibus plan on adding counts to the legend? For example, how many workstations are vacant, etc., instead of having to count the rooms on the floor plan?
Great question. There are reports that provide that data, and that's something we'll certainly take a look at. And if it's not in an obvious way, then we'll make sure that our product team is aware of that request. It's a great question.
Thank you. The next one, I believe this came in during, Brianne, your demo. The question is just cubicles or office with walls. There is a big difference. So I'm not sure if that was clarifying.
Yeah, so obviously if we're going and we're kind of planning how our space is going to be utilized and how people are going to be, where they're going to be located, if we can have somebody that they're going to be, it's in their own respective office so they can kind of be closed off, that is going to be a different situation than if we're having something such as a shared workstation. So on that floor plan that I had shown for NCO5, those were shared workstations that typically had an occupancy of around 9 people per workstation. So cramming a lot of people around a table. So that's where an organization would need to kind of make an analysis and a decision as to how they're going to change their occupancy to make sure that they can maintain those practices of social distancing.
Great, thank you, Brianne. The next question is, what about emergency exit plans in case of a case being detected?
Yeah, so the emergency preparedness application does have the ability to do emergency exiting plans. And we've also seen clients as well, if they use something such as the space console, that they can add that on as a layer. So you could go and build that in so that way people are aware of, in case there is somebody where there's been a report of someone that's COVID-19 and you wanted to go and clear the building, you could leverage both of those applications to do something such as emergency exit planning.
Great, thank you. The next question, could we see the homepage notification and can we customize it, or how much would it be to customize it?
Yeah, so I can go back and I can share my screen again here. Let me just pull that up. If I go back to me.
And while you're doing that, Nick, I'll ask you 2 questions that came in. Are these items available in 23.1 and 23.2?
Some of the features are newer than 23.1 to 23.2. The applications themselves are available, but as we are often doing, we're adding capabilities, refining some of the capabilities with every release. So some features may be only in this version, which is 24.1, I believe is what we were showing today, which is a great actual reminder. Version 25.1 will be coming out very, very soon, within a few weeks. So please be on the lookout for that as well.
Great, thank you. Brianne, back to you.
Yeah, so for this notification here, so as I mentioned, this is a customization that was made. It was made by our technical development team. So I'm hoping I can do it justice because I don't do the development work. But essentially where this is pulling from in the system is actually in the application configuration and the configure application parameters. So what the team had created is under the application of system admin, they created an application parameter of a COVID notification. And then they have a parameter value that's using to kind of fill in this text here. So that's how it works. And so you just have to go into the system administration. You go and you change the text that's showing up here. And then once somebody actually goes back to this page, you don't even need to go and republish the homepage. You just need to simply refresh this page and the notification will update. So as for what that costs, I mean, everybody's technical development is going to be different, so I can't necessarily speak to that.
Great, thank you. We have a few more questions. I know we're almost out of time here, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. But the next question is, will your EHS module allow us to create internal radiation usage permits or biosafety usage labs?
So I can take that one. We've actually had clients that have been able to leverage the platform to do that. So by utilizing things such as, again, that compliance management to go and use that inspection checklist portion as something as an actual permit application. So though that application is referred to as compliance management, I always encourage people to think a little bit more outside the box with it, and compliance doesn't necessarily need to be something that is, regulated. In that case, radiation and biosafety are, but it has a lot of flexibility, so you can go and utilize it for different purposes, such as, your biosafety permitting and your radiation safety applications.
Great, thank you so much. And I know that we're at time here. If we did not answer your question, we will reach out to you directly and get those answers for you. So we want to thank everyone for joining us again. Hope this was very helpful. And please remember, as soon as we close out of here, the survey will appear. So if you could just take a few minutes to complete that, we would appreciate it. Nick and Brianne, thanks again. Anything you guys want to close with?
Oh, thank you, and be safe.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We hope that you found it useful.
Thank you.